Today I have just a quick video for you guys. I really just want to talk about catching magnum-sized bass on magnum-sized Texas worms during the pre-spawn. This is a technique that I've started to do more and more every single year, and it really catches some really big bass for me. There are a few specific things to that Texas rig that I really want to talk about in this video. Now, this week is the Bassmasters Classic, and right now over at the Fin Fishing website until this Sunday, I'm running a sale where every single person who buys something over at Fin Fishing is going to get a free lure, a mystery lure that I have. I have a bunch of them in here, so you may order a rod glove and get a free pack of worms. Maybe you order a sun shirt and get a free crankbait. Whatever it may be, I'm putting a bunch of baits in there. Also, I have some used fishing reels. Like I said, over the last couple of days, I was going to sell these on Facebook Marketplace, decided not to. So I am just throwing some of these into these packages too. Not every package, but into some of them. I have about 6 reels left, and so basically I'm going to do about 2 a day for the next 3 days or so. Also, anyone who buys a sun shirt or a pair of the new duck shorts is also going to receive a Buzzer Rocks Blood Stop formula. So tons of free stuff going out the door right now at Fin Fishing. I will leave some links down below in the description. Shopping there is truly the best way to help support this channel, and I greatly appreciate it. All right, I lost my worm somewhere. But anyways, in this video, I want to talk real specifically about using a big magnum-sized trick worm for pre-spawn bass. Now, a number of years ago, really the only time I threw these magnum-sized trick worms was when I went down fishing in Florida. Now, if you guys have fished in Florida often, you know, Florida is just a worm state. You know, like I've caught tons of bass off of trick worms, big worms, Cinco style baits. It is just a state with all the vegetation where you can throw a Texas rig worm a lot throughout the entire year and catch a lot of fish. Now, a number of years ago, I got on some really good pre-spawn bites on different lakes like the Harris Chain, Toho, a number of different lakes down there. And what I was doing is using a simple Texas rig like the one that I have here. This is a Magnum trick worm, throwing this out onto grass lines and catching a lot of pre-spawn bass. And it was really, Florida was like the only place that I did this. Well, fast forward just a number of years, or just a few years ago, I decided to pick this up. I was fishing a lake. If you guys know, if you guys are from around Ohio, the lake's called Mosquito Lake. Mosquito has a lot of vegetation in it. And I was getting on some bass, throwing around a jerkbait and a chatterbait a little bit. But I really wanted to find something that I could fish a little bit slower through some of these areas. And I had actually found a school of bass that was kind of positioned on the outside of grass. And I was really having a hard time catching these fish on anything. I tried jerk baits, chatterbaits, different lipless crankbaits, and really couldn't get these fish to react. And for some reason in my mind, I thought maybe I'll throw that big Texas rig Zoom trick worm, the Magnum trick worm, like I've done in Florida so many times. And literally on my first cast, I hook in, I actually end up breaking off like a 4-pounder. But after that, I picked this bait up a lot throughout that day, and I started catching a ton of fish on it. And this was all during the pre-spawn. Now, when I think about big worm fishing, I primarily think about fishing it in the summertime, you know, fishing a big worm on ledges and on humps and rock piles, brush piles. But the pre-spawn is also a really good time to throw a Magnum worm. Now, if you can see here, this particular worm is a straight-tailed worm, and I actually prefer the straight-tailed worm over the curly worm, the curly-tailed worms in the pre-spawn. The biggest factor and the biggest reason because of that is just because I like a little bit less action in colder water. You know, those curly-tailed worms are going to have more action, and I'm not saying that you can't get bit on those things, because I'm sure that you absolutely can, but I prefer the big straight-tailed worms. Now, when it comes to fishing this bait, it is as simple as it gets, and I do think that this bait excels around grass cover, you know, any type of grass that you may have. But I've also done this, in the last couple of years also around wood. You know, kind of in traditional places where I might throw a jig, you can also pick up this worm, and it just seems like this worm gets a lot of bites. That's the thing that I like about it, is you will catch big ones on it, but you just get a lot of bites. I mean, it's basically like throwing a Magnum size shaky head out there and getting a lot of bites. And so the thing about this bait though, you definitely, what I've noticed specifically with the Magnum trick worm, is you want to make sure you have a good sized hook in it, at least a 5/0. Like don't go 4/0 or 3/0. The biggest reason is that this is a thick piece of plastic on here, and I have fished too small of a hook on this bait before, and I have missed a lot of fish. And when I switched over to using a 5/0 primarily, also kind of like a worm style hook, I don't really like EWG style hooks at all for the most part, but that worm style hook is the one that I use on this a lot, and that hook works really, really well. And I've used that anywhere from, like I said, Florida to Ohio, a lot of places in between. And to me, this is just a good technique to use when you know that you're around some fish. You know, primarily during the pre-spawn, I am gonna fish a lot of moving baits. I mean, I like the baits I mentioned earlier, a jerk bait, a chatter bait, a spinner bait, a lipless crankbait. You know, I like to throw a lot of those moving baits during the pre-spawn, but I do think that there's a time and place where you're not gonna catch every single fish on one of those loud, noisy lures. So if you get around some fish and you kind of wanna play the cleanup game, a really good bait to do that is one of these Magnum size Texas rigs. So I don't know why I didn't think about doing it earlier. Like, to me, it would just always felt like a Florida thing to do. It just always felt like a Florida thing to do. And all of a sudden I was just like, you know, I'm gonna bring this same thing up north, and I started catching fish on it. You know, a bass is a bass is a bass. That is somewhat true, not always true, depending on where you live. But man, I've caught a lot of fish here recently on the Magnum side, not recently like as in the last month, but over the last couple of years on this bait. It's just, again, it's something else you can throw in your repertoire, something else that can get a lot of big bites. You can also fish this on a wacky rig, and it just looks a little bit different than a Cinco style bait. So anyways, good little bait for you guys. Like I said, quick tip, just something that I've kind of done a lot more here recently, and I wanted to share it with you guys. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. I will see you tomorrow.